What's going on, guys? We are here today having lunch with you. We just want to eat and chill, do something a little new. This isn't a mukbang actually, so we just wanted to get that out the way because
it's lunch and we're hungry.
Yeah, even though it might look like a mukbang, it's not because we realize we're not the best mukbangers
we're
according to the last video.
Mukbangers ever.
Yeah, but I think some of you guys enjoy us eating in front of the camera, so we figured why not. And today on the menu is the good old classic Kimbap. Let me show you guys. Let's put out the handy dandy iPhone here.
Handy dandy.
This one is basically like the basic version. So you got like carrots, egg, omelet, spinach, and fish cake. And then I've got...
And Spam.
Oh yeah, and Spam, sometimes hot dog. My mom used to make it with hot dog. Mine is a little different. So I've got the spicy fish cake one. So we're just gonna dig in and we're gonna talk about a topic that Becky and I, we always discuss together because it's something as biracial, mixed people that are between two different cultures. We sort of get these things that we hear all the time, either from people within our cultures or people from the outside. So we just want to discuss some of the things that we hear and how it makes us feel. Now, this isn't like a venting session or anything like that, so don't worry. It's just, we thought it'd be an interesting topic just to talk about. So today we're gonna talk about some of the things that we hear as mixed Koreans, and this can apply to people who are also not, you know, mixed Korean. You might be mixed with something else, or you might be like a third culture kid or something. You know, I think that a lot of you guys out there will be able to relate in some way.
I mean, we bring up this topic because maybe to some people, this is actually good. I think there's gonna be 3 camps of people listening to this. One camp that says, I totally relate, this happens to me every day, this is my daily life, thank you for saying something. You can have the second camp that says, what, this is crazy, I can't believe this actually happens. No way, people don't actually say those things, right? And then the third camp is gonna say, who cares? Like, you guys are so narcissistic and why do you guys have to talk about this all the time, blah, 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 so much whining. I get the feeling you're gonna have one of those 3 camps, honestly.
Right.
And this is just judging by the comments we get or how people react to us when we do talk about this. For us, it's just like daily conversation stuff, honestly. Do you know there's been so many instances where I'll be out and about, something will happen to me and I'll come to you and I'll be like, oh my gosh, Cooks, this happened, this how it made me feel, blah, blah, blah. And then you just reaffirm me, hey, don't worry, I get it, you know, blah, blah, blah. And then I'm like, okay, I'm over it, and move on. But I think it can get tired to you.
But the funny thing is sometimes it'll happen to me and I'll bring it up to you. So it's sort of like we console each other.
Good example is when I was out shopping with a friend who's Korean American. And then the ajashi who was selling something, I asked like, oh, you know, is this something, something? And he looked at me with total shock and was like, oh, you speak Korean? Oh, I thought she would speak Korean, your friend. I didn't expect you.
Right.
And then he said it very loudly with his shock. And so I said, oh yes, okay, so can you please tell me about this item? And he looks at my friend, tells her, even though I'm standing here, and then he looks at me and again says, I just can't believe you with your kind of face would speak Korean. It's not what I expected at all. And then finally I was just like, okay, thank you, and we left, and he kept shouting after me, where'd you learn that? How come you speak Korean so well? Are you Korean? And it was very, I mean, he's coming out of a place of curiosity, but to me it was very hurtful. And so I came and told you that, and you were like, yeah, I get it. And it was just like validation for my bad feelings.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, because we relate in that. I think in those moments when it happens to you, for example, and then you're sort of in that emotional space because you haven't cooled down from it, I'm able to see it from an empathetic perspective and see, or at least understand why someone like that would react in that way, in which you understand that too, but you're sort of emotional in that moment.
Yeah.
And we just want to say that for the most part, I think, at least here in Korea, when older Koreans say things like that, we know they don't mean any harm by it.
No.
Most of the time.
Yeah.
But there is a point where we have to just be honest with how it makes us feel.
This is the crux of the matter, guys. This is, I think, what is very important to explain and when we're talking about these kind of things. And this is why I mentioned the 3 camps. Because again, you're gonna have people that, that's crazy, that doesn't happen. And then people who say like, who cares? They're just being nice to you. Like, they just wanna know, you know, they're not being mean to you, so calm down. Which, what we're trying to explain or express here is that while we understand the other perspective, why maybe that gentleman was speaking to me this way or asking me these questions, I get it. I do get it. But it doesn't discount the negative feelings that I get from those scenarios, those situations. Just even if it isn't specifically because of him in that one instance, but a culmination of this over and over and over again and what it represents to me, what it represents to us as outsiders. So the instance itself it's small, right? So, okay, one person, brush it off, Becky, it's cool. And ultimately, we always do brush it off. But in the moment when it culminates over time, and then finally it's just like, great, another person who points out my alienness. Oh, one more person telling me I don't belong. Okay. It can be very, I don't know even what the right word is. Demoralizing.
Right.
Yeah?
I mean, we talked about this in one of the first videos we did together on this channel before you were like officially part of the channel.
And I was very angry.
Yeah,
I'm sorry about that.
Yeah, it was what, like the did we do like 6 things that?
Yeah, like things we hate, people saying.
Yeah, something like that. So,
which was so silly, and you know, for me it was a venting session.
Right, but, which is fine, because again, we were trying to explain our feelings, but that's where a lot of people in the comments were like, well, they were in the camp of, you shouldn't let that bother you, and da-da-da-da.
Which is wonderful and well-meaning.
Right, but I remember we were talking about how it just culminates. It's just like constantly hearing that, you eventually get to a point where you're just easily annoyed by the one comment. So we don't mean to be that way, but it is what it is. That's how we feel.
Can I bring something up? I realize this is rude. There's a way of speaking to people. And this, I think, falls more into just human communication. How to give positive affirmation without accidentally or inadvertently putting a person down. Right? So, for example, something bad happened to you, whatever it is. You tell me, and I say, you shouldn't be upset about that. Look at the bright side. Right?
Right.
Oh, there's no reason to be upset about this because actually, this is a very good thing. Or you know what? Those people didn't mean it, so just brush it off. The problem with those kind of statements is it does not say you have every right to feel hurt or upset. You know, those people don't get it. But essentially what I'm saying is your feelings, like, they're not equal to what that person's accidental mistake was. Like, your feelings are here, you can brush it off, it's nothing. But that really is, it just further ignores how a person feels and the conversation isn't had. You don't actually address what's going on.
Right.
In this instance, it's a feeling of being shunted aside, a feeling of being pointed out. Oh, outsider.
Right.
You know?
Right. Or being reminded, oh, you're not full Korean in our instance, right?
Right.
So I think one of the biggest things that we get the most, especially me, probably more than Becky, but Becky still gets her fair share of it, is you speak Korean so well, right?
Okay, this is a good one to unpack.
Yeah, so like, so for example, you could put us anywhere, you know, in a convenience store, at a restaurant, or you're meeting someone, or for example, even I was just on set for a commercial that I was doing. I kept hearing, I think 2 or 3 times actually, different people on set, like the makeup person and maybe the stylist. I can't remember exactly, but they would say, oh, you speak Korean so well, after I say like 1 or 2 phrases or
You're
sentences.
Like, 네. Oh my God.
Right. When I just simply say 안녕하세요, which is the greeting, like hello.
It's hello.
Yeah, in Korean. Typically, you'll get, wow, you speak Korean very well, right? And on the surface, it's a compliment, right? There's nothing wrong with that. They're actually, from their perspective, complimenting me. But I think for me, how I end up feeling is, one, and this might sound silly, whatever. One, you're reminding me, oh, I'm I'm looked at as a foreigner or someone outside. I'm looked at as someone who is not Korean because I am half Korean. I have a right to feel Korean, right? And two, it makes me feel, in addition to feeling like I'm on the outside, I'm not recognized as Korean, it also makes me feel just different. And three, to put, I guess, fuel to the fire, for me, one of my biggest insecurities is the fact that I can't speak great fluent Korean yet, right? I'm working on it, but for me, it's just a personal thing. And it's just a reminder for me, I can't speak the language of my mother in a very like fluent way or in a like native way. The third one is more my personal insecurity that I need to get over. But the fact is, that's how I feel. But the first two, I think that's something that a lot of people can relate to because it's just a reminder, you're different. Because I don't want to be singled out. Even though I'm half Korean, I look different. I want to be treated just like everyone else, Now, we can unpack that because there's a whole other, we do get benefits to being half Korean, especially...
Oh, you should listen to our latest podcast on the Halfie Project. We talk a lot about that.
Yes, about entertainment industry in Korea.
Yeah.
As foreigners or as mixed Koreans. But anyways, so but what I'm saying is at the end of the day, I don't want to be reminded that I'm different because it's an identity thing, right? So I think for me, that's what kind of bothers me. It's it's another reminder that that I'm not seen or held to the same standard or the same level as I guess a Korean. And I'm using Korea as an example because that's where we live. We face this all the time.
This is the thing that I'm hoping we can convey, because on one hand, you could hear it in a way that's like, so we shouldn't tell you your Korean's good?
Right.
So you don't want to hear positive things while you're so uppity, right? I think on one hand, it can come off as this way. But it's a very nuanced underlining thing, because it's never about the flat surface of wow, you speak Korean well. If you accept it on the flat surface, it's thank you, I worked very hard for this. But the underlining meaning is by pointing out, oh wow, your Korean is good, when in fact you haven't heard any of my Korean. You just heard me say yes, no, 감사합니다, 안녕하세요. Then suddenly it makes you feel really, really small, as in, my expectation of your ability was here. My expectation was 0 and was like this, and you went this far. Oh, you went this much. Oh my gosh, your Korean's so great. That to me reveals that already you view me with an expectation of not expecting much from you.
That's good.
Because you're not Korean, clearly. And then you just show this one teensy little bit. And it's suddenly wow, congratulations. It's very patronizing in a way.
Right.
Without, nothing intentional, I understand. I think it's, again, a little bit different being, say, part of that culture or growing up hearing that language or growing up with the expectation, I should know this language. And then not being recognized as somebody who could or should.
A lot of people may not even ever understand what we go through, and that's okay. We just want to be able to explain. But and again, we constantly throw out these disclaimers we know people don't mean harm by it, because it's important, because in the past, in my experiences, even in the comments and stuff, people will misunderstand what we're trying to say, or they think we're attacking. We're not. We're not. We try to understand why it is what it is. We can get into the history of it, Korea is such a homogenous country, hasn't been open to the rest of the world freely, only but for a couple of decades. So it is still somewhat of a novice thing when a foreigner can speak the language of Korean, which isn't it's only the common language of the country of Korea, unlike English, which is a common language in many countries. So we understand that. So there is a whole history behind it, so we get it. But the fact is, we feel the way we feel. On the flip side, even a lot of Kyopos or Korean Americans or Korean, Canadians, wherever the Korean diaspora lives, a lot of times they'll face sort of the opposite of what we face. Because they look Korean, they look full Korean, they're almost expected to speak Korean fluently, and so they get judged for that. We have a lot of friends and people we know that sort of face that challenge.
Yeah.
So it's just an interesting thing that happens, I think.
It's important to point out that the reason for that is because Korean being the central only language here, and it's highly Korean people fought for Korean to keep the language, and so it's very intrinsic to being Korean, having Korean language, because culture, hierarchy, status, everything is built into the language. So it's sort of like a secret thing that you haven't unlocked it yet. Well, then you're not Korean, right?
Totally, yeah.
Yeah, it's very important. Being able to speak Korean well is really understanding the heart of Korean culture and Korean people and society. Language is very, very significant.
Right.
So on one hand, you feel like, I really want that. I really want to be there. And then you recognize, I'm not. I'm on the outside. And then when you speak a little bit, they're like, hey, you speak Korean great. And you're like, but I don't. Why are you telling me that I do? I don't. I know I don't. You acknowledge your alienness at the same time as they're pointing it out, pretending you're one of them. And that's a very conflicting emotion to carry, and it's very hard to put that in words. I'm struggling even now, like, how to express this feeling of separation, wanting to be uri so bad.
Right. Hopefully you guys can catch the heart behind what we're saying. But it is very interesting because, again, and Becky and I, we've especially recently, but I mean, we've been a student of Korean history to some degree for many years, right? And so when you begin to look at the history, you can understand why things are the way they are. Things make sense, right? So that's one thing that maybe we can get into in the future on this channel, is talking about those nuances from the historical perspective.
So here in Korea, of course, we speak Korean. And I have noticed for myself, when I come into a situation speaking English first, only English, there's kind of a weird dynamic of wow, you are educated, and oh my gosh, you speak English so well, it's so great, you must have lived abroad, smart foreigner, right? It's like, well, just because I speak English doesn't make me smart. Don't misjudge me, guys, you know, my IQ. And then you have, when I come into a conversation speaking Korean, I have on days and off days. So let's say I come in and everything's working smoothly, my grammar's like tick, 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 and people are like, wow, I had no idea that you weren't Korean, your Korean's so great. On one hand, it's like, yay, and the other hand's like, oh, you know, it's a really mixed bag. But then when I come in speaking Korean really badly, I feel people look down on me. And perfect example, if I go to a doctor's office and I'm asking questions and they mime they mime things to me, and I'm like, I understand, I'm just not getting the words out right now. They're like, your eyes have problems. Like, you need to take the medicine, I will give it to you. And I'm like, I know. So it's very, like, language is very strongly tied to our sense of, I guess, sense of value or sense of intelligence, because it's how people view you.
For us, being mixed, and even for me, knowing that I look just different, I'm always faced with the reminder that you look different, that you are different, that you're viewed differently, and that you're, in most scenarios, you're accepted as an outsider. I'm still accepted here, but I'm accepted as a foreigner. Most of the time, in my experience.
You know, this is kind of like when people are having a conversation and you're there in the circle and they're all having a conversation, and you're like, come on guys, what's funny? Tell me the joke. And they're like, you wouldn't get it. And then they keep, it has like this kind of feeling. I'm like, no, I would get it. Let me in, come on.
Right.
It's that kind of sensation.
Yeah, I just think it's, you know, these are emotions that we're still just working through and just trying to figure out, you know, but we know that at this point in time, this is just how we feel when we hear these certain things. We realize that we didn't really talk about all the other phrases that we hear and how it makes us feel, because I think it was just so much to unpack in this one.
Yeah, well, but I think, because this is not a, you know, like, oh, so 짜증나, like, this is not that kind of session.
Not at all, not at all. So, you know, if you are someone who is listening and you might feel like you don't understand where we're coming from, that's okay. We're not expecting you to. We just ask that you would at least respect the fact that we feel this way and that we're working through it. You know what I mean? So I'm okay to say that I'm a work in progress, and maybe in 5-10 years I wouldn't even feel this way.
That's true, yeah.
Yeah, I'm okay to say that.
Yeah.
You know, so you know, we just thought it'd be interesting to share with you guys, and you guys would also get a little glimpse into our world and our minds and our emotions, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think that it boils down to... At first, I was very angry when these things happened. I was very angry and hurt. And then I didn't know why I was angry and hurt. I just was. Then I came to understand and study and read and learn and listen. And then I started to understand the context and what, quote unquote, the other side, how they view me. That understanding turns into compassion. That understanding softens your emotions, softens your anger, softens your maybe resentment. And now for me, it's like, okay, we're doing melting a little bit, right? You know, melting a little bit.
Yeah.
Because it takes time. And so I think the reason why we wanted to talk about these kind of topics is because, one, it's difficult to talk about. Two, it's hard to just put it into words. But once you've heard it and you feel like, oh, that's how I feel. Whoa. And so maybe if you're in a place of resentment, you hear this and be like, oh, okay, then I can get rid of these bad feelings. Nobody likes to keep those bad feelings. So that's kind of the hope.
So if there's like anything that you guys out there relate to with what we said, we'd love to read about it and interact with you guys in the comments, because this is something we're passionate about. And this is something that we focus on a lot on the Halfie Project channel as well. So we're gonna link that because we have these sorts of discussions quite often, and even in longer form on the podcast. So definitely check that out if you're interested.
그리고 저희 비디오들을 보고 계신 한국 구독자분들한테 이렇게 말씀 한번 드리고 싶었는데요. 저희는 주로 영어로 얘기하지만 항상 뭐 한국인 분들이 저희를 어떻게 보시는 건지, 저희 주제들에 대해서 어떻게 생각하시는 건지 많이 궁금하거든요. 그러니까 지금은 영어로 하고 있지만 나중에 한국어로도 했으면 좋겠죠? 네, 그래서 뭐 생각하시는 거 있으시면 항상 언제든지 댓글을 남겨주시기 바랍니다.
I think that's it for today, right?
Yeah, that's it for today.
Yeah, thank you guys for listening.
Thanks.
Yeah, if there's other topics that you want us to cover in this Eat and Chill series that
Eat and chill.
we just established, I guess, or if you want us to just stop eating and just talk,
okay, stop eating.
We'll consider doing that.
We'll consider it. I mean, we're not going to do it, but we keep eating. Just kidding. We'll consider it.
All right, guys, we'll see you in the next video. Remember to follow us on social media and make sure you subscribe to this channel if you haven't already. And we'll see you next time. Remember to always seize the day. Peace.
Peace.